Spider Moon does whatever a spider do. Stuns their carries, what a guy. Does it again 2 more times. Look out, here comes the Spider Moon.
If you guys want a full release of that song, go ahead and leave a comment below, and big shout out to Mike Badgley, the singer of that audio. Awesome guy. But as most of you know, Amumu just got a buff where he now has 2 charges on his Q, letting him swing around like Spider-Man or Spider-Moon and boosting his win rate by almost 4%. I asked you guys how you felt about this, and the majority of you wanted a video on how people are playing the mummy as support, so here we go. Not enough time has passed since the change for me to find a single one-trick Amumu support player, so today we'll be looking at not 1 or 2, but 3 different players from around the world. We have OK With You from Korea, Xerxus7 from EU West, and Protos from the land of the free, America. Our players are Master, and Grandmaster, respectively. I chose these players because they're some of the most active Amumu support players at this moment. Together they've played a total of 69 games of Amumu support and have achieved a combined total of a 62% win rate, where they all continue to climb higher and higher to this day. But even with all of that success, Amumu support still has some issues that we need to talk about first. Like Ahri support, Amumu's one basic CC ability is a line skill shot that doesn't go through minions, making it pretty easy to dodge. Amumu's 2 other basic abilities require him to be right next to enemies, so if they are dodging his stun, he's effectively doing nothing. His damage mitigation pales in comparison to abilities like Leona's W, which means even when he does go in, he can easily get blown up. And finally, and most importantly, you can't even hug the poor guy, or else you'll literally die. That's in the lore, and it makes me sad. But even with all of these potential problems, these players have found a way to make it work. Both our Korean and EU West players do something before laning phase that you OGs who have seen the Zac support video will remember. They first go place their yellow trinket ward in lane or jungle to prevent invades, and then cycle back to base to grab a sweeper trinket. We just talked about how easy it can be to dodge Amumu's stun, so having a sweeper in lane to clear lane brush early helps them disguise when they're going in. Having a sweeper this early offers some other small benefits like more EXP from killing wards or lack of river vision for the enemy team to help with easier ganks. I'd heavily suggest doing the same. At level 1, all of our players take Amumu's new empowered Q or bandage toss ability first. It's a line skill shot that stuns the first enemy hit, pulls Amumu to that enemy, and now has 2 charges that can be used back to back after a 3-second delay. Every Amumu support that I've seen is maxing this first to reduce the cooldown a bit and do more damage with it. This is your key ability and really separates a good Amumu support from bad. If you're not hitting this, you're really not doing much, so all of our analyzed players are almost automatic when throwing this out. Landing both bandage tosses on an enemy can regularly mean a kill, even if they flash away, since bandage toss is longer range than a flash. You have to realize that now with 2 charges of Q at level 1, you have massive kill potential. Out of all off-meta supports I've analyzed, this is probably the most level 1 kills I've seen across all of them. Use your Q to stun lock enemies, but also don't be afraid to use it to get in range of enemies to hit your second Q or your ultimate later in the game as well. And because of the buffs to Q, Amumu support is now a beast at roaming. Our players look for telltale signs for roaming, like when their wave is pushed, they just went back to base, or their jungler is nearby and will start roaming as early as level 2. Having the ability to both gap close and stun someone for 2 seconds this early can overpower many champions in a 2v2, considering you're with someone who can output some damage also. While it's great that you can stay in lane and lock up the enemy ADC, what really pushes most of these players that we're analyzing today to consistently win games with Amumu support is their roaming. So look to buddy around with your jungler on the enemy side, head to mid lane, or even go top throughout laning phase to start tilting the enemies. At level 2, both our NA and Korean players grab E or Tantrum next. Tantrum does AoE damage around Amumu and also has a passive that slightly reduces any instance of physical damage done to him. So that could mean reducing the damage from an ability like Caitlyn Q or just a normal auto attack. Because of this mitigation damage, our players all max E second to help become more tanky on Amumu. More than just the tankiness though, this ability can supply some pretty solid amount of DPS thanks to the fact that its cooldown is reduced by 0.5 seconds anytime Amumu gets hit by an auto attack, not only from players, but from lane minions as well. So you typically want to lead with this ability after landing a bandage toss to immediately start benefiting from the potential cooldown through tanking auto attacks. By keeping an eye on your E cooldown, or just jamming E constantly in fights, you can get several of these off thanks to this. At level 3, the majority of our players take W or Despair. This is a toggle ability that does damage every 0.5 seconds based on a flat amount and the target hits max health. There's not much I have to say about this ability. If you're on top of someone from a bandage toss, activate it. If there's multiple enemies around you, activate it. If you forget to turn it on after going in and want to BM after you kill someone, activate it. There may be some niche cases against very tanky teams where you can max this second instead of Tantrum, but most of the time you're maxing this last. Finally, at level 6, everyone grabs their ultimate or Curse of the Sad Mummy, a huge AoE ability that does damage and stuns everyone within its radius for 1.5 seconds. Of course, this ability gives all of our Mummy Masters the option to initiate and engage fights almost better than any other champion in the league. But those engages and big multi-person stuns are regularly just saved for team fights now when the opportunity is available. With the bandage toss change, what this ultimate allows you to do is so vile, so disgusting, that the enemy carries will want to QQ to their mummies. Let's talk about this disgusting combo. If you're pretty far away from your prey, you want to start with a bandage toss, stunning the enemy for 1 second and getting closer. On your way there, activate your W to start doing more damage over time. Once you've traveled there, use your ultimate to stun them for another 1.5 seconds. Now while they're stunned, use your E and auto attack, and then finally hit them with one more Q, stacking an additional 1 second of stun onto them as well. If you're really close to the target, you should still start with Q and W on the way there to both stun them and start doing more damage. Then since you're closer, you won't have as much travel time, so you can now E while they're stunned. Then after your E, use ultimate to continue and to stun lock them longer. Work in an auto attack or two while they recover from the ultimate stun, and then finish with your second charge of Q to again stack stuns onto them for longer. All said and done, if you land both bandage tosses and your ultimate, an enemy with no tenacity is locked up for 3.5 seconds, which is more than enough time for your carries to come in and burst them down for the rest of their life bar. All of our analyzed players' mid-game plan is the same old song and dance from early game. Amumu Support is freeing because you don't need to stick with your ADC at all. You thrive more on roaming to other lanes where someone is pushed too far and punishing them. This also applies for lost enemies in the jungle who are trying to walk through it with no vision. If Amumu is there with some backup and has both charges of his Q and maybe even his ultimate, that enemy is as good as dead. Of course, everyone is also looking to play macro objectives like Dragon 2, which is also great for Amumu because of his crazy AoE ultimate. Once those team fights start at macro objectives, Amumu Support can do 3 things depending on the game state. If your team is ahead or even, you can look to be the one to start the fight with a multi-person ultimate. Catching 2 or 3 enemies with a Curse of the Sad Mummy is regularly enough to give your team a huge advantage in a fight. So if their teams are close and enemies are on top of one another, specifically with at least one squishy carry, Spider Moom your way in there. Now being in the middle of the enemies, you can apply more damage with all of your abilities, soak up a bunch of damage, and use your second charge of Q on someone of high value or who's trying to run away. If enemies aren't stacking on top of each other in fear of a big ultimate from you, which will happen pretty often, you can instead still just look to use your combo that we talked about earlier. Locking up a carry for 3.5 seconds is normally enough time to turn the team fight into a 4v5 quickly, and them losing a main damage threat early means a lot less DPS for their team in comparison to yours. And lastly, if you're behind or there is one problem diver on the enemy team, Amumu can instead become a pretty decent peel support. You'll again use your same combo from earlier to slow down their diver from reaching your ADC or other valuable allies. If there are multiple enemies diving on you, you can split your CC between them, allowing your carries to kite away for more space and to whittle down the aggressors before it's too late. Some quick Amumu tips and tricks I picked up while just watching our players. Amumu is part of the Buffer Ability Club, which means that you can cast an ability first and then flash to get a little more range on it and negate the cast time. For example, you can buffer his Q by pressing Q and then immediately flashing after, E and immediately flashing after, or Ult and immediately flashing after as well. Amumu's bandage toss will pull him 2 enemies after they use a dash. This can be good or bad if someone's pulling you under a turret, but against ADCs like Ezreal or annoying champions like Shaco or Zed, it's normally a benefit. And finally, don't only use your Q or bandage toss to engage. Use it to escape sometimes too. Even if something's out of vision range, you can still bandage toss to it, making for some crafty escapes or entry points. For their builds, everyone we're analyzing starts with a Relic Shield. From there, they're all rushing their mythic items. Both our EUW and NA players always buy Locket, but our Korean player prefers Frostfire, which can also be strong. Along the way, they're building their boots as well. Our EUW player likes mobility boots for roaming potential, but more regularly, they're all either building plated steel caps or merc treads depending on the opponent team. For their next items, they look to the enemy team. Against AD-heavy teams, items that build out of Warden's Mail are great since it has a passive that reduces auto attack damage, which synergizes with Amumu's E. As such, grabbing items like Frozen Heart or Randuin's Omen are great options, or maybe a Thornmail instead for armor if the enemy team also has a lot of healing. If magic damage is an issue, they all opt for Abyssal Mask as really the only solid option for Amumu. If you want to be even more annoying with your stuns, Anathema's Chains is awesome as well. If you find yourself engaging a lot and dying a lot after you engage, potentially a Zhonya's Hourglass could work, but I really cannot suggest it. I just don't think it's that good. If the game goes late or they need some more oomph in their builds, they'll get an Elixir of Iron, and throughout the whole game, as a good support does, they're buying control wards and maybe a ward stone if the game goes very late. For their runes, everyone is bringing Aftershock for more tankiness, Font of Life for more sustain, Bone Plating because it's just the best rune, or maybe second win against poking teams, and Unflinching for more tenacity. Their secondary pages and flex runes fluctuate. With our EUW player, he brings Hextech Flash Traption and Cosmic Insight with ability haste and defensive options. Our Korean player brings Biscuit Delivery and Time Warp Tonic with 2 adaptive force and 1 defensive rune. And finally, our NA player brings Cheap Shot, Ultimate Hunter, and 2 adaptive force and 1 defensive rune. I personally like the EUW player's rune page the best, but feel free to experiment with all of them or find something that works better for you. Amumu Support works well with aggressive ADCs like Draven or Tristana, or ADCs with CC like Jhin or Senna. Amumu Support struggles against long-range supports and ADCs like Xerath and Vel'Koz or Ezreal and Sivir. Catch me on Twitch playing Amumu Support on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 6 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. Join our Discord and talk to like-minded players and suggest upcoming champions as well, or check out our last video that was on Lissandra Support. See you guys next time. Peace.